He granted them a couple extra centuries of life. He even used them to save the Davidic dynasty. But they had descended to even worse depths than before. So Nahum prophesied the utter destruction of Nineveh, and it was so utterly destroyed that until somewhere in the 1900s, a lot of skeptics thought it was a myth that it was ever that big. When we found the ruins again, it was every bit as big as the Bible described it, and it was destroyed exactly as the Bible described it. But it was so utterly devastated that we took forever to find it again. I think God only let us find the foundations of the ruins so that he could prove, nope, Bible's true. He likes to string along with skeptics that way. Have you ever noticed that? Every time someone comes up with a great new argument against the Bible, oh, the Hittites never existed. We've got no... Oh, wait, we just found their library. Oh, the Assyrians. Nineveh was never that big. Oh, wait, there are the ruins. Oh, there wasn't any temple. There wasn't any Tower of Babel. Oh, wait, there's the ziggurat. It's like every single time. Pilate was never a governor of Judea. Oh, wait, here's the plaque with his name on it. Serious, God just likes to string them along for about 10 to 30 years and then produce the evidence. But the Ninevites become a picture of a sort of a darker side to this whole thing. Because when Yeshua said the son of Jonah, he wasn't simply talking about his death and his resurrection. He was talking about through his death and his resurrection, the Gentiles would repent, just as Nineveh repented. Nineveh turned away from its schemes to come down and destroy Israel and add it to its empire for a couple hundred years there. But in the end, they started going after wealth and power again. They fell back into their old gods again. And they came down to try to destroy the Davidic monarchy, to destroy the people of God, and God destroyed them in turn. We can also see this with Midian. When Moses fled from Pharaoh, he went to Midian, and his father-in-law Jethro was the high priest of Midian. But the Midianites joined with the Moabites to tempt Israel into sin. You remember the whole story of Balaam and his wonderful talking donkey? I thought about phrasing that slightly differently, but for this crowd, I think I'll keep my language polite. That's right. Balaam talked out of his donkey. Balaam was hired. He was a true prophet. He was hired to curse the children of Israel. Tried 3 times, kept blessing them instead. So he finally told the 2 kings of Moab and Midian how they could trick Israel into cursing herself. Now, afterwards, God told Israel to go after Midian and to take revenge. He didn't tell him to go after Moab. Why? Because Moab was legitimately afraid that Israel was about to invade him. He didn't need to be, but the point is he actually had an excuse. Midian had been friends with Moses. Their high priest was his father-in-law. But out of jealousy, because remember, Midian is descended from Keturah, Abraham's second wife. Midian was one of their forefather Midian was one of those who was sent away so that he wouldn't be a threat to Isaac. And because of that, apparently they never forgave the sons of Isaac. And they turned on Israel as a result, and so God judged them. Likewise, David, for a time, found refuge with the Philistines. He was a mercenary captain in their midst. But then when they went and attacked Israel and killed Saul, and were pressing to destroy the whole nation, David went and took up his kingship and destroyed the Philistines. How much more will the son of David turn on those nations that for a time had his light, but as they descend into secularism, as they forget the one who redeemed them, as they forget that he once dwelt among them, turn on his people. By his people, I mean both the church, who are adopted in, and Israel, which is back in the land. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what then of the church? Because, as I think most of us are aware from history, the church and the Jews did not exactly get along for a long time there. How do we understand that? Well, I think in part we can sort of understand it through that rubric of adoption again. Just like I've watched my brother and I've watched my daughter struggle with their identity, especially when there are other children born into the family, trying to understand how they really fit. I really believe that a lot of the struggles of the first couple centuries between the Jews and the Gentiles, not only the non-believing Jews, but also the believing Jews. There were a lot of believing Jews. You can find them commented on by like Justin Martyr, Eusebius, Augustine. You can find them referenced in numerous canons and bulls. But there was real struggle there because I think that to a certain extent the Christians were like, wait. If the Jews are still the people of God, does that mean we're not? And it was made worse by my people because my people weren't exactly happy with the Christians. Our rabbis had, of course, rejected Yeshua. Our priests had rejected him. Now, not all rabbis did, by the way, and not all Pharisees did. There were actually quite a few Pharisees in there, but the majority, the leadership, did. And they didn't want these Gentiles in on the thing. The fear was the Gentiles would cause us to fall back into idolatry. And rather than see this as a wonderful thing, that the Gentiles were turning to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we were afraid of how it was going to affect our position. And as a result, these two brothers started going at each other. Now, you guys are studying the history of Judah and Israel, right? Southern and Northern Kingdom. There's actually a parallel right there. Now, you remember that Solomon, of course, was the height of Israel's power. Israel was an empire in the midst of the earth. Fabulously wealthy. Built the first temple, the like of which has never been seen before. The divine presence, what our rabbis call the Shekinah, dwelt in the temple. The Bible is called the glory, the kavod. And this all came at a price, actually. Because Solomon had to conscript a lot of laborers. He had to raise taxes. He had to trade laborers with Hiram, king of Lebanon, in order to get the wood he needed for all of his building projects. And so after he died, the elders went to his son, Rehoboam, and they said, look, we've done all this really hard work for these 40 years for Solomon. We've built up this great kingdom. Now, if you will just, reduce the taxes, reduce the conscriptions, we will be yours forever. Rehoboam's like, let me think about this. So he goes and he asks his advisors, and the old guard is like, yeah, do it. Great idea. They'll love you. But his young, cocky friends are like, no. If you can let him get away with that, you will never have the control your father did. You need to tell them that you're going to be harder on them than your father Solomon. Rehoboam went for the advice of his friends over those of the elders. As a result, and this was actually God's plan, because Solomon had committed some sins of his own, of course. He had built the temple of God, and then he filled it with idols. Now, in Solomon's mind, these idols were out in the courtyard. He was treating them as if these other gods were just sort of the lords-in-waiting of the eternal God of the universe. God still wasn't pleased because he wanted no idols in his presence. He wanted no other gods with him. And for that, he told Solomon, I'm going to strip the kingdom from you, but not all of it. I'll leave you a couple of tribes, but only because I promised David. But the rest of the kingdom is going to be stripped from your son. And indeed, Solomon's son was very foolish. As a result, Jeroboam was able to raise up the northern tribes, and they split off. Northern tribes called themselves Israel. The southern area became known as Judah, for the main tribe that was in their midst. Now, Jeroboam, if he had followed after God, God would have given him a long-lasting dynasty, but Jeroboam had a slight problem. See, 3 times a year, all Israelites are supposed to, all who are in the land, if you're in America, it's okay, you don't have to fly over there 3 times a year, but all Israelites are supposed to go down to the temple, to make our sacrifices, to celebrate. We just came off our fall High Holy Days. One of the High Holy Days is Sukkot. And in Sukkot, you go out and you build a temporary booth, like a tent. You camp out for a week. And you were supposed to go up to Jerusalem and camp out for a week. And Sukkot was supposed to be this most joyous feast. It was a time when, having been purified by the sacrifices of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we then went on and sacrificed 70 bulls. Why 70? Because we were sacrificing for all the other nations. And in the midst of this week, we lit up the whole city with fire. They put giant menorahs up in the temple. The priests would actually juggle torches and dance. The whole city would be filled with singing. Everyone who is a farmer or herder had to go and bring 1/10 of their crops, or 1/10 of the increase of their flocks, up to Jerusalem for this event. Why so much? Because God wanted so much food flowing that even the poorest would be stuffed full.